I started. Oh Christ. Hi. That was an interesting one. It's the run-up to the 2020 elections in Ghana, and one would think that all the waters would have settled by now in respect of the positions the various political parties want to take with their various parliamentary candidates. But that doesn't appear to be the case. In Parliament, there's a controversy as to whether a member of Parliament for Fomena constituency who was elected to go as an independent in the upcoming election should be allowed to serve the remainder of his term, or whether as a result of Article 97(1)(g) of the 1992 Constitution, he be removed from Parliament for the remainder of the 7th Parliament's tenure. Today we come your way with another episode of the Hangout series. Remember, this is an interactive platform brought to you exclusively by Speech Forces with the support of Media Inc. We are joined by two very fine gentlemen formerly of the University of Ghana. I shall be introducing them shortly. But to give you a certain context into what we are discussing today, we are looking at as to whether or not the application of Article 97(1)(g) to suggest that the Member of Parliament for Fomena should terminate his seat or should terminate his tenure in Parliament immediately, or he be allowed to serve his continued term. Remember, this is not a court of competent jurisdiction, neither is it a Supreme Court, so we can't pronounce on the meaning of Article 97(1)(g). What we'll attempt to do is to provide some political analysis in respect of what should be done and what the proper political position should be for either of the political parties, especially in this case, the New Patriotic Party and Parliament. I'm joined today by Jeremiah Sekyi and Solomon Omani-Mensah. Jeremiah is a former student at the University of Ghana, now a graduate of pharmacy, and Solomon is an economist, and he works with Capgrove Consultancy. He's a part-time political analyst. He loves politics a lot, and in his own words, he says he's an avowed pro-democrat. Jeremiah is elected not to tell us his political leanings. I'm sure as we go on, we'll find out. My name is Joel Telfa, and I'm happy to be here for another edition of the Hangout. Very shortly, we shall be dovetailing into the conversations we shall be having with the gentlemen. Let us push to commercial, and we'll be right back. Great, welcome back. Remember to share this page with each of your friends, your followers, and everybody else to join in on this very interesting debate. We're having two very bright young people speak to the issues that matter to you. This is a very topical issue in Ghana, and then we shall be directing all our condolences to those who have lost their lives, especially in the SARS protest. Later on, we'll be speaking directly with these gentlemen about what they think. But now let's invite Jeremiah Sekyi to open today's discussion in respect of why the Member of Parliament should be allowed to sit till his tenure is over. Jerry, obviously, you take the position that even though he has decided to, quote unquote, betray his party and switch party lines by deciding to go independent, due to the time to the election or whatever reason, even if it's 2 years or 3 years before the election, we should still allow him to complete his tenure in Parliament. Why?
Thank you very much, Telfa. And just to give this entire issue a background, we need to acknowledge that the democracy that we live in, the democracy that we practice, is one that is constantly unfinished. I mean, for crying out loud, it is a concept that was derived by some ancient Grecians who had not even developed the concept of underwear. So it is something we must constantly rethink from time to time. We must review, we must reassess, and we must redesign the architecture of our politics. Especially looking at Ghana, wherein Section 35 of the People's Representation Act also states that spiritual injury is an offense. So looking at the kind of laws we have in this country, it is clear that we direly need constant review. Now let's look at the issue at hand. We are talking about parliamentarians and whether they should be allowed to change party lines and maintain their seats. Now, there are different angles to look at this. Essentially, I think what the question is that does the member of parliament retain his legitimacy as a member of that parliamentary body when he chooses to change his political party? But also, what effect will this legislation change have on the kind of politics we have in the country? So let me start with some clarification and giving some context of this issue around the world. So this is not a new move, or if we are to enact this legal amendment, it won't be novel looking at the politics of other countries around the world, because it happens in the United Kingdom, it happens in Canada, it happens in India, and I am reliably informed that it is also a symptom of the politics of Nigeria. And what usually happens, and has been the case in all of these countries, is that when you leave your political party, you become an independent. You don't leave to join another political party. You remain an independent till the end of your term, and then you can choose to run under any flag that you want. So first case that I am going to present is on the legitimacy of the member of parliament. And it's a very essential question. The question is that what voting calculus went into selecting the member of parliament? And after this change, does the member still hold legitimacy? So it is a common idea that the member of parliament, as it stands now, is elected based on their affiliation to a political party and their personality, and that these two criteria are intertwined. So then the argument of Solomon, or the stance of Solomon, is that once you change your political party, then you will have reduced the legitimacy for which you were elected for, because you were elected on the ticket of this party. But note that essentially what that argument also seeks to say is that if you change your political party, then the will of the people to elect you based on your personality is also denied. So in any case, there is going to be some form of change of the original will of the people, and we people who believe in this stance together with me would like the member of parliament to stay in power. But also note this, that if this legislational amendment is made, then there is going to be a greater concentration on the individual during elections. So then the argument that when you change your political party, you have defied the will of the people will not exist, because once this change is made, people are going to recognize that you are standing most primarily as an individual, because your political party can change at any point in time. Secondly, what effect is this going to have on our political system? Because that is something we need to consider whenever we are looking at a constitutional amendment. We want to assess whether it would have positive consequences on the country. One thing I would like to argue is that it would improve political accountability. Why is this so? Because as it stands now, these members of parliament have dual allegiance. They are so beholden to their political parties that they have to follow the political parties along every single issue. Even though they are not forced to vote on every single issue, the principle of this law essentially argues that they exist to serve the will of the political party. So what this does is to perpetuate that dual allegiance that these members of parliament have. And what detrimental consequences that causes is that if there is dual allegiance, obviously there isn't going to be enough attention being given to the interest of the people. So what happens when you divorce political parties from these politicians is that you enable them fully focus on the interests of the people, which means that at any point that they realize that the interest of their constituents is diametrically opposed to the interest of the party, they can choose to change that political party stay in parliament as independents, and then choose to run as they wish for the next term. Now, accountability is something that is extremely important to Ghana. We have realized for decades that our politicians are not as accountable to us as we want them to be. So if this constitutional amendment has the potential to increase accountability of politicians, then it is something that we should consider and at the very least attempt. Next impact that this policy might bring to our democracy is that it is going to create a more inclusive politics. Now, when we talk about the impact of this policy, one argument that usually comes out and has been raised in different countries is that it is going to affect party unity. Because once you can leave at any point in time, then the essence of party loyalty is eroded. But I would like to draw the attention of the populace to how party loyalty at some point in time goes against loyalty to the people. So if we can maintain loyalty to the interest of the people, then party loyalty does not matter as much, or it should not be a priority, because the essence of party loyalty and the essence of political parties is to ensure that we live in a democracy where the interests of the citizens are taken into consideration in politics. So then what I will be doing is showing you how the interests of the citizens are still safeguarded. So what happens when there is a reduced attention to the political affiliation of the individual, because the political candidate can change any political party at any point in time during their tenure? Then the citizens are aware that they are voting for someone whose affiliation is fickle, and hence they need to assess the quality of the individual rather than his fickle affiliation to a political party. What this does is to increase the appeal for independence in the country. Firstly, because then there is a divorce between the political party and the politicians who are running, and hence independence running becomes a much more appealing option to Ghanaians. And why is this important? Obviously, people can argue that independents are not so important, minor political parties are not so relevant in Ghana. But if you look at the political situation of Ghana, for decades there has been deterioration of our economy. We have encountered serious challenges in the country, and you can't have radical change because the duopoly that exists always opts for incrementalist change and comparing the failures of one party to another. So then that duopoly as it exists right now does not create the change that people need. But when you allow for these changes to occur, then you break that duopoly and you break that affiliation with political parties that allows individuals to perceive independence as appealing. But also lastly, it reduces the suppression of minority voices in these parties, because they can always have the bargaining chip of leaving and hence being able to contribute more to political discourse within their parties and without by representing minor political ideas in parliament still. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And let me just begin with you, Solomon, on this note. Obviously, he has made a lot of points, and you would have your chance to respond. But I want you to start off on this note for me. Does a member of parliament lose his legitimacy as a result of he crossing carpet?
I think an MP does, because in the first place, let's consider the origin of the office. The origin is you running on that ticket, and you run on the ticket of a party. The party comes with a platform, it comes to the ideology, it comes to what it stands for. And so by aligning with that ticket and that platform, you embody it in entirety, not just your personality cult. And so once you choose to cross carpet, you are delegitimizing the very engine on which you run to come into office. And so in principle, it's no more whole. And so it's legitimate for you to leave and run again. And I'll explain further how the people's will is lost if we allow you to continue in that same breath. But before I proceed, let me first pay respect to the various protesters protesting in Nigeria, to end SARS and now SWAT, and also to speak up against the carnage going on in Congo and then Namibia. So that's it. Let's proceed. So first, some context. Typically in our space, in Ghana and especially in the African space, like he rightly mentioned, there's lots of personality politics. Unlike the Western world where people run on platforms largely and on ideology and on etc. to vote for even persons in a party, people often end up voting for individuals who are popular, who are wealthy, who have some particular thing that gives them a cult in the locality and drives their politics, like in Japan. But is this a tangent that's healthy for us as a people? I say no. Why? Because the reason why people run on political party tickets is that, like he mentioned in his very first line, we exist in a continuum. Also, is the very same way politics enables that continuum to continue. Individuals, however, are transient. They come and go. But political parties allow those platforms and ideas to continue even beyond them, because politics is linked to development and to growth of a people. Because in essence, we aren't just building the will of a particular person, but of an entire nation or community which lives beyond a person. And so in principle, it is justified that once people are running on these platforms and tickets, they stay with them, more so because they are representing the will of a people. Now, he makes it seem as though people running, people who are MPs are representing the ideas that people personally voted for them for. But note, when you are voting for an MP, more so one who ran on a political party's ticket to come to office, you are equally voting for platforms. Let's give real examples. So for example, NDC says that they want to abolish the Public Universities Bill, or they want to abolish the double track system. When I'm voting for my MP to go to parliament, I'm voting for him or her to go help push that platform, to go help push that idea, which comes from the party. And so it's intrinsic and tied to the will that pushed you into that office. Once you choose to cross carpet, you are violating that very will, because you can't separate them from why you are in that office in the first place, because it's a part of why you are in there. And so it violates the very will of the people, because people then choose to run on platforms, or can do that, and when they get into office can choose to distance themselves from those platforms for their very own selfish interests. We see it all the time in Nigeria with the PDP and with the APC. We don't think we want a culture in a democracy like Ghana where people get to just cross carpets at any time for their personal will. More so in this context, we complain bitterly every single time about how our politicians are selfish. What this does is to only create leeway for that selfish interest to continue, because where you think you want to cross carpet and gain will with the other side because now it's suddenly more popular, you get to do so. But with politics, even at a point when your political party is unpopular, once you were voted into power on that ticket or platform, you are coerced to stay in there and to correct the wrong or right the wrong, and not just leave because you think in these times the other side is more popular. We think we prefer a side that gives us a chance to right our mistakes and to endure long suffering, so we get the long haul of politics and political parties. Next argument, let's consider the parties. I understand that the aim of politics and development is for the people. That's fair. But equally, political parties are an important agent in this conversation. It's unfair for a party to help fund your campaign with money, with support across board. You get into parliament and for some reason you say you're crossing carpets. How also do we help protect the interests of the biggest bodies in a political space, i.e. political parties? What he's proposing suggests that you can easily betray their will when you get into parliament, and that's unfair. And once these are the agents or carriers of our body politic, then we got to ensure that their interests equally in there are met. Otherwise, you create a jungle where the highest bidder gets the best folks, and we don't think we want a system where that's always going to happen. We think we must protect our system, and you only get more sanity where there's that continuum in our politics and someone doesn't cross carpet and gets to maintain the will on which he ran for office. But more so on legitimacy, like I argued, you can't separate the will of the party from your office, because like I mentioned, people vote into power equally to go push platforms. So even on principle, once you are entering the office and you are representing those people in that particular constituency and the party that you campaigned on, they are tied together. And so you can't get to decide to cross carpet and yet not want to you can't get to sever ties a political party and then cross carpet. By severing ties equally, you must sever ties with the office too, because that party came with the office. And so we don't think that there's anything healthy for the people. But last argument on accountability, because it seems like a very big thing in here. Really, is there any accountability where we go for more person-based politics, i.e., I think Telfa is a good person, I want him to be in parliament, I don't care, even if he campaign on NDC tickets and he goes in there and he crosses carpets, I don't mind. That's bad, because it means equally the wealthiest of people get to always remain in politics, because we create a jungle where the highest bidder always wins. So if I think that it's more favorable going to the other side, I can just cross carpet and then distance myself with, say, immediate fault happening in the old party. Therein we lose accountability. But even when things are going wrong and you are forced to stay in there in the party, you still stay in there and are part of the accountability process. But you get to cross carpets in the side and lose a chance to be held accountable when things are going wrong. We think we don't want a system that encourages that. And so largely on accountability, on the will that people select you on, and on having a politics that happens in a continuum, I don't think it's justified for the former MP to remain in his office.
Great. That has been the opening session of today's discussion. Jeremiah has been arguing that based on the principles of elections, why people are elected in the first place, based on personality, politics, and the likes, it is important that we respect the people's will and allow people that have been elected by constituents that have cast their ballots serve out their full terms, regardless of whether or not they decide to switch party. In any case, because of our political history, in an attempt to promote accountability and in a sense of political understanding across board, there's a need for us to allow this kind of discussion, because ultimately it inures to our benefits politically. Solomon disagrees. Solomon has said that because of the nature of which people are elected in this country, it would be unfair to suggest that the biggest actors in the political space do not benefit throughout the entirety of the serving of the member of parliament. In any case, if you want to promote accountability, the accountability must start at the doorstep of the member of parliament to his party, and at all points in time, they must be able to show fidelity to the party that elected them. People vote based on the platforms of these parties. To the extent that you don't represent the party anymore, you don't represent that platform. It has been a very insightful first half discussion that we've had in respect of Article 97 1G and its implications on our body politic. We are discussing whether or not a certain MP who decides to cross carpet should be allowed to remain in parliament, or whether or not he should be yanked from his seat immediately and not be allowed to serve for his full tenure. When we return, we shall be looking at responses from both of the gentlemen seated here today, and then we shall be taking some of your comments. I encourage you to provide your comments in the comment section. We will try as much as possible to read each and every one of them that come through. We are very excited to have you on the stream. This is the HangOut Debate. We'll be back. The Hangout provides a platform for young people to debate national and international issues and extend the dialogue amongst the youth. It is therefore important that you out there support this program. If you're interested in joining us and being a partner for this program, please call any of the numbers on your screen, and we'll be glad to give you feedback in that respect. We look forward to collaborating with you, and we hope you join us on this platform. Welcome back to the Hangout Debate. The Hangout is brought to you by Speech Forces Organization and Media Inc. At this juncture, we have opened the poll in the Facebook comment section. We expect you to cast your ballot in respect of who has won today's debate. As you know, the results of your poll are very instructive as to who comes on the show next week, so it is very important for you to participate in the polling process. We also encourage you to bring in your comments and your questions for these gentlemen. Remember, there's a segment where we'll be asking them questions you have posed to them in respect of today's conversation. I shall be starting the response segment with Solomon. Solomon, obviously Jeremiah has raised some very legitimate points. I mean, for me, the biggest one he talks about is because of the nature of our politics and the divisive nature of our politics. It is welcoming if we allow people to cross carpets as and when it suits the needs of the people. Why should we sort of like depart from this, especially with regard to our political context?
So the fault here is that we even assume that crossing the carpet is because they think it suits some people's needs. No. The reason why a person will cross carpet is because it suits him or her in that office. It's not because it suits the people's needs. The people want it out. You would get that when they are voting for someone else. But people cross carpet because they want to run away from a current system they no more want to identify with. That's personal will. It's not the people's will. And more so, the only way we can judge people's interests is when they participate. We can't determine people's interests arbitrarily. The only way we can is when they collectively vote for a new person or for a new platform. But in the interim, within those 4 years when you're in parliament, decisions you take, i.e. like cross-carpeting, don't reflect their will, more so like the former MP. We don't think that in itself shows that you are representing their will. It's only because you lost the primary. And so you think you are disgruntled and you're moving. That's personal interest. And so in there, we don't get accountability like I mentioned. But he made an assertion that early on that when people cross carpet, they are crossing carpet to become independent, and so that's fair. But no, in Nigeria, classic example, which is like the biggest example in here, people cross carpet to other parties, PDP to APC, and then come back and vice versa. That's a chaotic system. More so when we want a democracy that is forward-looking. We don't think we want to create a system where in the interim, anyone can choose to mess up the platforms on which they come to power. We think in itself, it confuses the message to the people who need like a wholesome system to determine who or not they want to represent them in office. But he suggests that we depart from party loyalty and care more about individuals. But really, what we fail to see is that the party loyalty in here is the people's loyalty. Because like I keep on hammering, the parties exist on platforms and ideologies and on principles. So when people say I want NPP in power like Akufo-Addo, it's because he comes with free senior high school. He comes with this and that. So Mahama, when they are pushing Mahama in power, he comes with taking away double track. He comes with Okada. Telfa is laughing, etc. And so you cannot detach the platforms from the party. And so the people's will is tied to the party's loyalty. So when an MP is in parliament voting for a bill, even though other parliamentarians and minority are protesting, it's because those who voted into power knew he came on that platform, and so he has to protect that particular will. And so in here, we cannot make party loyalty sound like a bad word, like it's a bad thing to do. Really, it's the will on which they were in there, and so they have to protect those interests and respect them. I don't think in here we achieve accountability. I don't think we achieve any progress and real change for the people, and more so, we just disrupt the continuum in which our democracy exists in.
Right. So on that note of disrupting the continuum in which our democracy exists in, I like the example he gives. In Nigeria, it's a very chaotic system. Almost every 4 years or 8 years, there's a flurry of mass movement of politicians from one political party to the other. I mean, depending on which political party is willing to bend to their whims in respect of putting them up as candidates. Why should we allow ourselves or our democracy, which is going to be so beautiful, be put at the risk of a situation where politicians move as and when it suits them?
Great. So I think there's this false dichotomy in the debates, that is, if we don't have this law, then we have the same chaos that happens in Nigeria that you have given the example of. But then there are other more stable examples. For example, in the UK, in Canada, in India, you are allowed to ditch your political party, but you must remain as an independent till the next election. So that is also a valid example that we can use to remove that chaos. But moving forward, he speaks about the will of the people and how they are elected based on platforms. But note this, that association is because of this law. If this law is changed, the people will now vote knowing that the association between these politicians and their political parties is not as strong as it was. So then, if the politician chooses to leave the political party in parliament, then they won't be going against the will of the people, because the people voted knowing consciously that the politician has the choice to leave the political party during parliament. But moving forward, Solomon talks about the political parties as stakeholders and how we must protect them as well. Valid. These political parties are essential. But when you look at the examples that I gave, because you can't only take this policy in the worst case scenario. If you look at the good examples that I gave, you see that this rarely happens, because what essentially happens is that the government always needs a coalition in order to rule. They need a majority in parliament, either from their own political party or affiliates, in order to pass their policies. So what happens is that it gives these members of parliament greater leverage when negotiating and having discourse within their political parties, because the alternative is that you have certain members of parliament who are from minority neighborhoods or constituencies that suffer from some platforms, yet they still have to vote regardless. But even in spite of that, Solomon argues as though if this policy still exists, if this law still exists, you cannot vote against your party. As it stands now, you can't vote against your party, and there isn't a law preventing that. So would he also state that currently you are going against the will of your people if you consistently vote against the will of your party? No, that is not the case, because as long as you can prove to your people that you are fighting for their interests, you can still be held accountable to them. But I would like to end by making it clear that the association and accountability he speaks of exists as that law exists. But if the amendment is brought forth, people will be more conscious of the fact that they are voting for individuals who are going to create change for them. And I don't think individuals are going to be extremely selfish, as he argues that that is going to be the case. That is not the case that we have seen in the better examples that I give. But even if that is the case, that they are going to be extremely selfish, note that in the political game, everyone is selfish. As a voter, I don't think you go to the polls thinking about everything that is going to happen to everyone else except yourself. And politicians are exactly the same. They are selfish. However, their selfishness is attached to a goal. It's a give and take. I need power and you need your interest to be represented. So you can't be selfish and also perform your duties as well. I don't think they are mutually exclusive.
Great. And that concludes really what has been a very interesting engagement. I mean, I'm at the loss as to who has won today's conversation. Very engaging content provided forth by both of the speakers. We encourage you to participate in the poll that is going on right now. You need to help us make a decision as to who has won today's contest. If I had my way, I think both gentlemen will win, but eventually we have to declare a winner on today's show. We shall be back shortly. When we come back, we shall be looking at questions and comments that you have raised, and we shall be having a short discussion with these gentlemen in respect to those questions and how they decide to respond to them. The Hangout is brought to you by Speech Forces in collaboration with Media Inc. We shall be right back. Welcome back to the Hangout. Jeremiah and Solomon have been looking at the impact of Article 97(1)(g) on our democracy and what it entails for a member of parliament to cross carpet. We have had the first phase of the discussion where each of them have provided arguments in favor of their various positions, and they've both responded to each other. At this juncture, we shall be engaging them in respect of questions that have come up, and then we'll read some of your comments. So the first question I want to direct really at Solomon. I mean, there's situations where people vote skirt and blouse. When we say skirt and blouse voting, we mean they decide to vote for a different candidate presidential and different candidate parliamentary. So ultimately, I feel that ties into Jeremiah's point when he says people vote based on personality traits. And so we have instances where several constituencies have moved to different directions depending on who the parliamentary candidate is for which political party. And so it is not entirely the case that people always vote based on political party lines, ideologies, platforms. So how do you respond, especially in light of the fact that, I mean, people's personalities may always win an election? And so if that element is not important, why should we, in any case, prioritize party platforms in this instance when people have, on occasion, used their own personalities? For instance, I'll give you the example of Joe Osewusu, who is first Deputy Speaker of Parliament. In 2008, he ran as an independent candidate and then defeated the NPP candidate, and subsequently has come to represent the NPP. So it tells you that it is not a given for political parties to win or to be in contention in respect of some of these parliamentary races. How do you respond to that?
Okay, so the situation you give shows them that there is no guarantee. So I could also mention how people vote for Ablakwa in North Tongue and expect that the NDC's views are what are voted for in Parliament all the time. Then a year on in Parliament, Ablakwa gets a very good deal from the NPP that says, look, come join us, and we'll give you this and that. Then he goes. And for the next 3 years, he's with the NPP. That equally violates the will of the people. And so let's not create a system, like I'm saying, where the arbitrary power then lies in a singular person's hands when the person is representing a constituent's views.
But Ablakwa can stay in Parliament, and let's say the NDC is in government. He can stay in Parliament and decide not to vote for any of the bills, legislations, anything the NDC does. He can oppose the NDC. I mean, we see that in the US, for instance, where Republicans are openly opposing Donald Trump. That can happen, and he can still remain in the party. So all the risks you talk about can still happen with he being a member of the party.
That's fine, but you realize that those people, yes, they do get to vote against bills from the president, or even like this guy Romney voting against Trump or voting for conviction. That's fine. It's a stance in a particular time, but where you choose to cross carpet, that is a whole. You are completely leaving the party. And like I'm saying, once it's a part of why people voted into power, you and in fact, it forms a large reason why. Otherwise, then you won't even run the party's ticket. If they could win as independents, those people wouldn't even go as MPP or NDC, but they do. It means it's intrinsic in why you are in that office, and so let's not violate that will. You could choose to say go against one or two bills. Equally, the very same way people who are aligned to parties at some point in time disagree with the government. It doesn't mean as a whole they are no more in line with the government. For example, Anna Navarro is always speaking against Trump. It doesn't mean she's no Republican. She still is. Cindy McCain, same thing. It doesn't mean they lose the intrinsic value or underscoring value of being Republicans. Same thing in here. You can vote against bills or stuff sparingly, but leaving altogether is just a no-go area. It's a no-starter, a non-starter.
All right. On that note, Jerry, let me come to you. I mean, people are elected for a reason. They're elected on a certain platform. They go into Parliament, and don't we risk creating a chaotic situation where people who use political parties get into Parliament, and when they find it convenient, decide to become independents, cross carpet, switch political parties, and we're creating a chaotic system where there's no sense of if you like, certainty in our democracy.
Great. So, yes, you have some form of certainty if you keep the law. That is granted. But we also have to look at the alternative benefits that you have from our side, which is more accountability directly to the people. So, if this law is repealed, what you have is that these MPs can change party at any point in time. Yet, the argument that we have heard from time to time is that these political parties invest so much into these individuals, and they, in effect, ensure that they get into Parliament. Note that because of the attractiveness of this deal, you won't get that kind of entropy that we are afraid of. Like I've shown you, in the vast majority of examples around the world, Nigeria is actually the minority. Yes. In the vast majority of examples, this does not happen so regularly.
Okay.
Because you know that if you go and become an independent, you may not have the benefits you have being in a political party. So this decision calculus in mind is the reason why this is most instances a rare decision. But let's assume that there is so much chaos in the system, and unfortunately for Ghana, we take the worst example. Why is that still good? So you argue that politicians are put into the parliament by the political parties, and it is going to erode some level of trust. Note that when this law is changed, it is going to change the way we approach politics, because political parties are going to recognize that individuals can leave during parliament, which means that at that point they are matched in terms of their bargaining chip. What happens on this side is that when you enter, the political party owns you more than your own people own you, because you are there as long as you support or you are part of the political party. And I think it is better for the system when you are there because the people voted you into power and not because you are a member of that political party, and you can still represent their interests. Like you yourself said when asking Solomon a question, you can be part of that party and vote against every one of their bills, which means essentially you are against that party, which is what really matters if we are thinking about the effect it has on the country. So if on his side you still have all the harms he's saying would happen on our side, then we prefer the case that you can divorce yourself and the political party knows that this is a possibility when they are supporting your platform of running into office.
Final question. Are you making a case for the complete annihilation of political parties? I mean, if I get all that you've said correctly, people should be beholding to the people that elect them and not their political parties. So based on all that you have said, I get the sense that, well, we don't even need political parties in the first place. We can use cause personalities and people's own resources to elect them, and they can decide to align themselves based on how they are feeling at a particular point in time. So are you suggesting to us today that political parties are not required and that their sense or their importance in our body politics is overrated?
Well, in summary, I'm not a closet anarchist. That's a quick answer to that question. But a more detailed answer is that no, obviously, we need political parties. But what I've been arguing for from the start of my case is that we need to match the bargaining power that members of parliament have against the power that these political parties have over them. Okay. Because in the status quo, the political parties have overwhelming power, and if the members of parliament realize that going in support of the party stance is against the reason for which they were elected, they cannot make that decision. So in this case, the political party and the member of parliament both have leverage and they can both coexist. Like I have argued from the start, we have examples across the world where the kind of radical chaos that has been presented will not occur. That is because there is still mutual benefit between members of parliament and political parties. And the case of crossing the floor only happens in extreme instances when the member of parliament realizes that going in line with this political party is against my survival as a member of parliament, survival being linked to the will of the people.
Great. On that note, we have come to an end in respect of today's conversation. We are joined by Jeremiah, Sekyi, and Solomon Omani-Mensah. We've been discussing the impact of Article 97 1G of the 1992 Constitution and what it means for a member of parliament who was elected to switch political parties or decide to remain as independent. We have been asking the question as to whether or not this member of parliament should be yanked from his seat or be allowed to serve the remainder of his term. Jeremiah has argued for a situation where members of parliament must be allowed to freely switch without the repercussion of having to leave parliament. And then Solomon has said it is because, or in the interest of our democracy, for us not to allow the repeal of this particular clause of the Constitution, we should allow it to operate as it exists now. And that has been the various positions proffered by the gentleman. When we come back, we shall be ready to announce to you who has emerged as winner in respect of today's discussion and a few more comments. We shall be back shortly. Don't go anywhere. want to lie through my teeth. Welcome back. We have been having a very engaging discussion. We're happy to have you here, as we always say, every Saturday at 7 o'clock for a very instructive and interactive session with young people. We engage young minds on pertinent national and international issues. We have debated the Western Togoland issue here. We've debated the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we also debated the NDC's attempt to legalize the commercialization of motorcycles. This week we looked in respect of the topical issue where the MP for Fomena has been withdrawn by his party as a member of that party, and so Parliament has been in a dilemma as to whether they will yank him from his seat to allow him to continue to serve for the tenure of the 7th Parliament. I've been joined by Jeremiah Sekyi and Solomon Omani-Mensah, two very bright young men who have helped today's discussion and made it very insightful and interesting. At this point, I'm happy to declare the results for today's debate, and I'm told, or I'm reliably informed, that we had a statistical tie, and so of the 54 people that participated in the poll today, we had a split number, an even number, determined that both gentlemen deserve to win today's discussion. And per the rules of engagement of the Hangout, it is required that both gentlemen come here next week to ultimately have a decider in respect of the contest. So we'll be seeing you, Solomon and Jeremiah. Thank you very much for coming today. We'll be seeing you next week. During the course of the week, we'll be sharing with you what we'll be discussing. It promised to be a very insightful discussion again. Let me take the opportunity to stand in solidarity with our Nigerian brothers who have been protesting for a better part of a week now in respect of the police brutality and the irresponsible administration of the police service that has gone on in Nigeria for quite a while now. We stand with them when we say end SARS and end SWAT. I mean, the renaming doesn't change anything. We are saying end police brutality now. We are also saying end gender-based violence in Namibia, and we are saying that the world needs to take a closer look at what is happening in Congo, and where leaders are culpable, they should be held responsible. We urge all young people to sign up to speechforces.org if you are interested in coming on this platform to debate, as the gentlemen have done. We also encourage you to check out Media Inc. for your various interactive and interesting programs. They have a litany of beautiful content, and I'm sure you'll be very engaged when you decide to come to this page every other day. Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Hangout. My name is Joel Telfa. I will see you next week.